Hello, my name is Vincent Taglimonte.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Somerville, Massachusetts, 1925.
So how old are you right now?
I am 95 years old.
Do you feel like you're 95?
Sometimes I do, but thank God I can still move around.
Physically, what is it like to be 95?
That's a good question. Because I've never been here before.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is you're still able to do a lot of the things you enjoy.
Say that again, please.
Are you still able to do a lot of the things that you enjoy?
Yes, I do, but there are a lot of things that I can't physically do anymore, and I realize that.
And if you could tell me, sir, for the record, what branch of the military were you in during the war?
I was in the United States Army. I was drafted.
What division, regiment, and company were you in during your time overseas?
During the time overseas, I was in the 80th Division, 319th Regiment, as an infantryman.
And what company?
Oh, Company B. Yeah.
What was your specific job in Company B?
I was a platoon leader. I was a doughboy, yes.
What was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the service?
I was staff sergeant.
And before we go any further, sir, I just want to backtrack. You mentioned you were born in Somerville.
Yes.
Did you grow up in Somerville?
I grew up in Malden most of my years. I went through the Malden schools. That's Massachusetts. I was kind of young and I didn't realize that we were in a depression, but I got a feeling from my parents that there wasn't too much cash to throw around and that we had to be frugal.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had an older brother that was he was in the Navy. He was a naval air pilot. He was a Commodore, I think. Is that what they call him? Yeah. And a younger brother that was in the Korean War, Robert. And I have a sister that's still with us in New Hampshire.
Before the war broke out, what were you planning on doing with your life?
I thought that perhaps that with my knowledge of mathematics, I could possibly be a pretty good engineer in any aspect.
Do you remember the first jobs you had growing up?
Well, I worked with a painter. I was painting. And there were many jobs. I worked in a shoe factory. I was a foreman in the shoe factory. And in those days we had city dumps. And too young to own a bicycle, and I wasn't going to ask my parents to buy one for me. So I kept visiting the city dump, and before you know it, I and a good friend of mine put two bicycles together, and we had a two-seater, and we both pedaled, and we got some good mileage out of it.
When you and your buddies would get together, when you were teenagers, what kind of mischief would you guys get into?
Oh, we used to like to steal fruit in the autumn or when late summer. Some of the fellas liked to pull false alarms, but I didn't approve of that.
Anything special on Halloween?
At Halloween, we usually go to a party and then chase the girls home right after the party. Yeah.
Do you remember soaping any windows?
Yes, and we were soaping windows, and we also had bean blowers. If you know what that is.
What's that?
It's a little tube, and you fill your mouth with pea beans, and you can be pretty accurate with them with a little practice.
Good practice for your future in the military.
Yeah, yeah, it improved my aim.
Can you talk to me about your education? What level did you make it till?
I graduated high school, but when the war broke out, I went to Malden High School. They shifted us, and I got into a special scientific course where I could study meteorology and aviation, and I had a 2-year course in German, which helped me when I got overseas. I spoke Italian, English, and I spoke German. As a matter of fact, they used me there as an interpreter for a time. Actually, when I turned 18 in March, I was still in high school, and I got a draft notice. But my dad, who was also a World War I veteran, got me an extension until I graduated. So I graduated in June of the same year, and the day after graduation, I was at Fort Devens as a soldier. So I didn't have a chance to enjoy my graduation.
What do you remember about that draft notice as an 18-year-old in 1944?
Well, it wasn't too easy to take, but I was with all my friends from the high school, the senior class, and we all went together when we shipped out of Malden to go to Devens. They gave us a IQ test there, and then we were pretty well separated. You know, I became a PFC almost immediately. Possibly for my IQ test, I guess. I don't know. Or just sweating and taking salt tablets to stay healthy. You know.
What do you remember about the segregation?
Segregation? Yes, I've also saw a few examples of the segregation. People getting on a bus, and if they were black, they were delegated to the back seat of the bus. Some black people were forced to cross the street if they saw some white people coming. I did see a couple of confrontations, but nothing to speak of. I don't like to speak of that anyway.
But that must have been just such a completely alien environment as someone who grew up.
Yes, it was.
Up here.
Yes, it was. It was quite. It was something that we had to get used to. because we would run into these situations, and we didn't know exactly what to do to stay safe. You know, we didn't know where the dangers were. We just didn't like the environment.
So after your basic training, sir, what happens to you?
After my basic training, I was assigned to the this slips my memory, but anti-aircraft, 40 millimeter anti-aircraft automatic weapons, and we trained as anti-aircraft people. I was the section chief. I had my own crew. I had a director and a gunner and other people, and we practiced firing at airplanes with carrying the socks. We did quite well, but then when things got sticky overseas, they disbanded the outfit that I was in, and I was sent overseas immediately when things got tough in Europe, and so I went over there alone. Yep.
So, can you take me through what was your port of embarkation? Where did you leave the U.S. and where did you go?
Yeah, POE, yes. From the point of embarkation in New York, yes. And from what I remember, we landed in Glasgow, Scotland, and we were in the train down, we went all the way down to Le Havre, crossed the English Channel, and before you know it, I was in the 80th Division. And I crossed the Maginot Line without a rifle. That's how important things were at the time. So I picked up a BAR and carried that for a while. A BAR is a automatic weapon.
How much did the BAR weigh?
23 pounds. Yeah, BAR weighed 23 pounds. I'm quite sure. I probably couldn't hold one today.
I wouldn't be surprised if you could.
Then we went right through. I remember going through the Siegfried line also after that. Then my memory gets a little bit obscured, and I know we ended up in Belgium someplace.
Do you remember what month you joined the 80th Division? It was after the Battle of the Bulge, right?
No, it wasn't after the Battle of the Bulge, because the Battle of the Bulge was extended to after I was there. I was probably in the Bulge when we did the cleanup, after the rough time, I guess.
And before we get into your combat experiences, do you remember, you're a replacement, and once you get to Le Havre, how do they get you from the replacement depot to the 80th Division? Is it on trains or trucks or?
Well, we crossed the channel in one of those I forget what they call them. They're a troop ship. It wasn't a troop ship. It's where the front drops down into the water and you come running out in. What do they call those?
LST, landing.
Landing. LSTs. And then from then on, we were trucked to wherever we went.
Do you remember the scenes of the devastation as you guys move forward towards the front?
Oh yes. I saw a lot of that, and it's hard to remember because I don't want to remember it, you know. But there was a lot of devastation. There was a lot of destruction. Probably didn't have to happen, but it did, and there were many people that just weren't going to go any further than where we were. Yeah.
What do you remember about the actual joining of the 80th Division? You're this green replacement, and you're just shoved into this. They had seen a lot of action.
Yes. Well. The thing is, we did see a lot of action, and then I felt like I was rushed into this thing because I went through the depots, I guess they call them, the replacement depots, and I've forgotten. I lost my train of thought here. Then we just got into what we had to get into there. Yeah, there was a lot to be seen.
Once you've joined the 80th Division, could you please take me through your first time under enemy fire?
Under fire? The first time we went under fire, we were advancing on the enemy. They were there. We could see them. They were firing back at us, and then we were told to hit the dirt, and we did because there was a barrage coming at us, and I laid on the ground. I was pinned down, so to speak, and I laid there for the longest time next to a German soldier that didn't make it, and I didn't know where I was, and when I dared to get up, there was nobody there, and I had an awful time trying to catch up to my outfit. The rest of the boys.
I can imagine, your first experience under enemy fire being, this artillery barrage must have been frightening.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, I mean, what do you see, what do you hear when artillery shells are coming in around you?
Well, you have to. At first, it's frightening. It was deadening. But after a while, you have to kind of feel just what is really happening, and you could tell whether it was friendly fire or the fire from the enemy, and you could tell by the way the shells burst, that the sound of the shells, that whether it was our fire or their fire, but there was plenty of it.
Did any of the older men or some of the combat veterans, did any of them take you under their wing?
Yes. The older veteran, it just seemed like it was their duty to do that. And before you know it, you are an older vet, and it only takes a few days to become an older vet. Once you got the taste of it, you know what you're doing.
Do you remember the names of any of the men you were close to that you served with?
I remember the names of some of the fellas in the States, but I'm not too sure I remember too many people that were overseas, because there was a lot lot of coming and a lot of going. You know, you just couldn't make friends with a person that's next to you one day and he's not there the next day. You know, I was fortunate to be okay.
My understanding is that you were wounded, though, as well.
Yes.
Would you mind taking us through the incident of how you were wounded?
If I have to.
No.
I will. It was almost to the very end of the war, and we were in Germany on the. We ended up on the Inns River on the Austrian border, and there was a lot of flak, and we were pinned down for quite a time, and we couldn't move, and until we brought the tanks up, and the tanks gave us the support that we needed, and I evidently picked up some shrapnel. I was wounded, and since my parents, my dad had died and my mother was very ill, I asked not to be evacuated, that I would heal and without incident.
So the reason you didn't want to be evacuated was so that they wouldn't send a telegram.
What they do, they send a telegram home immediately if you're wounded in the service. You know?
Could you tell us where were you hit with the shrapnel, sir?
My arms, my hands, you know, mostly. I'll explain what happened. Yes, it got close to, there was an explosion close to me, and I felt the pain, but it was shrapnel. It wasn't a bullet or anything like that. So I went down, and I was okay. I was able to escape that.
Do you know, was it from a mortar or was it from an artillery shell?
It was an artillery shell. Yeah, it was probably a mortar shell. Yeah, a mortar shell most. Yeah.
And did you patch yourself up, or did a medic come, or?
A medic came to me, yes, but he patched me up a little bit. It wasn't that type of a wound. It wasn't anything that I couldn't survive.
When you came home from the war, you know, decades later, did any of the shrapnel find its way?
No, it was okay. I do have a few scars, but but there was nothing stuck in here or anything.
I've met a lot of veterans who, you know, they would get shrapnel wounds and it would be embedded.
Yes.
And they'll be sitting down, you know, 50 years after the war, pick at their skin.
Yeah.
It'll come off.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I can say that I was in Buchenwald, and I was in Ebensee. I remember going to Buchenwald, but everybody, all the Germans escaped. We went in one side, they went out the other side. But then, just about at the end of the war, I ended up in Ebensee, and I think that was in Austria. I'm quite sure it was. And when we went in there, there were no Germans, just these poor people that were laying in cots, and some were alive, some weren't. We tried to save the ones that were very, very thin and sick, and the medics were feeding them cheese and things like that, but it didn't help. It wasn't a very good diet. They went right through them. So one thing I did see that intrigued me a little bit was that you could see that that the prisoners that were mobile and healthy, not healthy but mobile, would gather in a group, and before you know it, they would when we would disperse them, there would be one person left on the ground, and we were told that that person was probably one that collaborated with the German guards. So we kept them as individuals, and we wouldn't let them bunch together because they had their own law. They were retaliating. Yep.
When you stumbled across Buchenwald, and that other concentration camp, had you heard about what the Germans were doing to the Jewish people, or was it a total surprise?
It was no surprise to us. It was discussed by our officers that what we were running into. We saw some of the people that in Germany, the most of the civilians thought that this didn't happen, that the higher officers didn't know that, it had no knowledge of what was going on, but we heard it. We heard it through the experiences of other soldiers that it was not a good scene. That the Germans were not the nicest people. The soldiers weren't.
Do you remember personally interacting with any of the prisoners in either of the camps you went in?
I did at one time when there were some Italian prisoners. I don't know what they were doing or why they were there, but they for some reason I could understand them, and I spoke with them, and they were trying to explain what they were going through, but I didn't get too much out of that. But I could speak with the Italian prisoners.
I appreciate you sharing that. I just want to go back into some of your experiences in combat, sir. My understanding is that you saw a lot of action in Weimar.
In Weimar?
If you could pretend I don't know anything about Weimar, what was Weimar?
Weimar was the I think, I forget what they called it, the Third Reich, and I think that's where they kept all their records, and all their office buildings and everything were there. And I remember going into Weimar. I'm going to say that I might have been the first GI into Weimar, because I rode on a #1 tank going into town. But I don't know about that. But when we got to Weimar, it was all offices and all kinds of records, and we stayed there a few days, and the GIs went in and just made a mess out of everything that was there.
Do you remember, in the towns that you would encounter in Germany, could you describe, my understanding is that there was a lot of house-to-house fighting as
Yes.
you guys got further into Germany.
Yes. Yeah, we did that. We would get into a town, and we would have to clear out all the houses, and just going from get into a house and go from room to room with a rifle and just make sure there was nobody there. There were many people that just gave up and asked us not to hurt them in any way. And but we did a lot of this clearing out, and I can't remember too much more of that. But
what about the meats that you'd reach up and get the meats out of the fireplace? Tell the story about
well. It was a battle of survival too. We would get into a house, and we always knew that we could find a fireplace there that they were curing some kind of meat in the fireplace, and we got a lot of hams and things like that down. And if there were chickens out in the backyard or anything like that, two of the guys in my crew knew where to find the eggs and things like that. So it was a battle of survival.
You know, when you're going into an enemy-occupied town and your objective is to clear the houses of the enemy, what's the actual process? So if you're on the outside and there's the enemy inside, you don't just knock off, do you guys throw in grenades, or what's the actual strategy when it comes to properly?
We were all given a sort of a designated area to clear out. And a lot of times we ran into opposition, and where there were soldiers involved, German soldiers, and they retaliated. They had one weapon there that they kept under their arms. It was on the end of a stick, and it would just, I forget what they called it. It would potato masher or something like that, and so we had to be careful. We had a couple of times we had to back up on account of the attack. But we had this designated area and we just went right down the street as a rule, and we cleared this.
You know, I've interviewed a lot of different World War II combat veterans, and it's still one of the scariest things for me to appreciate is the house-to-house fighting. I mean, you're 18, 19 years old. Okay, say you get in the front door, but then, as you mentioned, you go room to room. I mean, what is that like, sir, to go room to room?
Well, what you try to do is probably make some noise, maybe, to alert them whether they're going to fight us or whether they're going to just accept us, It wasn't easy. We didn't like to do it, but we did it. We had to. It'd been better if we had a pistol instead of a rifle, but the rifle worked because we put the rifle in first and we followed it in.
Would you guys fire into a room even if you didn't know there was anyone in there just to be safe?
No, we wouldn't fire unless there was a danger, but your finger was on the trigger, so.
And most of the houses that you went into with your squad, I mean, would the Germans just surrender, the soldiers, or was there often they would fight back?
Oh no, they fought back and then they retreated. They didn't surrender. They retreated, but they didn't surrender. I didn't see. There's only one incident where I saw a couple of fellas, couple of Germans surrender, but mostly they retreated.
Where would they retreat to if they're in the house?
Well, no, they would leave town.
Oh, I see.
They would just back out of town and retreat. I remember one incident where we came up on a hospital, and it looked, it looked safe enough because it was a hospital, and we didn't think there'd be anybody there. And before you know it, we were ambushed, and so we had to be real careful that even in the hospital, they were. There was enemy action, and that's where we captured a few of them that, for some reason, didn't run, but most of them retreated.
What's the process when you capture a German soldier? I mean, who surrenders?
Well, the process is to send him back through our ranks, and there'd always be an outfit behind us, like a backup, and they would. We had a system where they would go right back and get locked up somewhere, or get imprisoned. Yeah.
Did you have any experiences against mines? Against mines?
We saw the experience, but we had. This is an odd thing. We had one fellow, one GI on my crew that came from Arkansas, and he had a way of, I don't know what it was, but he used to take us through minefields, and we would just follow his steps. And he would take us through mine. We could see the mines in the ground when we went through. They look like little clothespins sticking to the ground, you know?
That GI from Arkansas, would he do this without a mine detector?
No, we didn't have mine. I never saw a mine detector. No, not where we were.
So he just knew.
Well, it was this fellow. I wish I could remember his name, but he would do that. He was streetwise, I guess. Yep.
Did you have any experiences against the German Luftwaffe? Did any?
Just once we were up in, I think it was in Kassel, Germany. It was Easter Sunday, and we were just on. There wasn't any flak where we were, and I and my friends witnessed a battle between their Messerschmitts and our P-51s, and it was a real dogfight. And as we were watching, the ground, somebody raked the ground with gunfire right where we were standing. So we got into a couple of homes there. We just went in our house, but we were walking on the street going to church.
Yeah, I mean that must have been so neat to see, and then very scary.
Yeah, it was scary. It was interesting until
they tried to kill you.
Yeah.
Did you have? I know you got there, in early '45. Do you remember any of the patrols that you went on?
Any what?
Patrols.
Well, I wasn't a scout. I was. No, I did see one night, but it wasn't a patrol. It was a German patrol. We were in a barn, from what I can remember, and we were on guard, and we saw a German patrol. I guess a couple of scouts that were trying to locate us. They were trying to draw some fire from us so that they could determine our location. And gee, they were close enough that we could almost touch them, you know, but we didn't. We just stayed quiet and let them go by. Yes.
How many of them would you say?
Oh, there were about 3 of them that we saw coming right by us, you know, one after the other, keeping their spaces.
I'm surprised someone, you know, with a trigger finger didn't open up on them.
You wanted to do that, yeah, but we knew what was all about. We didn't want to draw any fire, and that was it.
Was that the closest you would say you got to the enemy?
I think so. I think so. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very. Did you have any experiences against German tanks? Did you see or take fire?
No, not the German tanks, but there were a lot of experience with our own tanks. There was one incident there where it was our own tanks. We were laying on an embankment and we were actually firing at the enemy. We could see them, and then it didn't look good for us because they were advancing on us. And the next thing I knew, our tanks come up the street, and I was laying on my stomach firing over an embankment, and they swung. One of our German Sherman tanks swung the barrel right over me, right over my head, and a couple of blasts went off, and I couldn't hear for 2 weeks after that. It wasn't funny. But I didn't see any of their tanks. No, not the combat I was in.
What do you remember about the destruction done to the German towns that you were fighting in?
I remember the town of Nuremberg. That was supposed to be very interesting, and Nuremberg was one city in another city. There was an inner city and an outer city, and the devastation was absolutely terrible. You could walk up the street at night and you could hear people under the rubble speaking, but you couldn't see them. They were just trying to survive. It was terrible. It was terrible to watch. And then another time, we were going through, and I think this was in the Sa Basin, where we must have had some flamethrowers, and I saw many Germans that had been burnt. I think they were in caves and they got burnt out. We got there after that happened, but there were many Germans that were just looked like charcoal. A burnt body isn't pretty, you know.
What were your thoughts towards the Germans at the time?
I wanted to hate them, but from my experience, I had a lot of respect for the Germans as engineers and as people that were able to get production. They had many things. They had a breakfast cereal that originated from a bark of a tree, and they also had they had weapons that were almost comparable to ours. They had an 88 there that was comparable to the 75s that we had on the Sherman tanks. and they had a burp gun that just sounded like a burp, and I don't know how many rounds they fired in a few seconds, you know.
Were there times you remember being under burp gun fire?
Yes, I remember that. I remember going down the street at night, and I forget where we were, but there was a barrier right across the street so that our tanks couldn't get through. And so we fought around the barrier, and they were waiting for us. They had their guns aimed at this particular barrier, and they were rubber guns. Yeah, but we survived that pretty well. We were able to. They used logs to build a huge fence, but we were able to knock it down and continue our march forward. We at Frankfurt on Main, I guess they called it. We crossed the Rhine River to establish a beachhead, and it was at 1 o'clock in the morning that we did it, and moonshine, you could see everything. It was not the best night to cross a river, and we were under fire crossing the river, and I lost a couple of men in my boat, and we had wooden boats, and the men didn't want to wanted to duck down, and I was trying to explain to them that it was a wooden boat, that it wasn't going to do any good, and I ended up paddling with my BAR, using my BAR as a paddle to get on the other side. And I had a backpack. I guess it got shot off my back because I didn't have it when I got off the on the other side. But we did establish a beachhead there. And I had a bad experience, but it was okay. I confronted a German soldier, and I was able to beat him to the draw, I guess. Yeah.
What is that like, sir, to be 19 years old and to be put in a position where it's kill or be killed?
You just do it. I guess it was part of the training. It was part of the training that made you do what you had to do. Yeah. We were well trained.
And that encounter was just once you reached on the German side of the Rhine River. That encounter with the German.
Well, yeah. When we established the beachhead, we tried to expand it, and there was a beach house there, or a boat house, I guess you'd call it. And I was just going around, and I met this person face to face. But I was able to get my rifle around before he had a pistol. And I got my rifle around before he had a chance to get me.
It could have been a German officer.
It was a German officer because
Say that.
because I was, I don't know, I should tell you.
You don't have to go into.
Well, I kind of panicked, and I ran back to the CP where the captain was, and the captain knew that I was in trouble, so he ordered me to go back and get that man's pistol, and I did. And I brought it back to the captain, and he said, keep it. That was it. I took it home.
You know, if was it a Luger?
What?
Was it a Luger?
It was it was made by Luger.
I don't know much about German pistols.
It was a,
PP7.
yeah, a PPK.
PPK. Yeah.
It was a PPK.
Do you still have it?
Well, it's in the family.
Oh, that's great.
It's in the family.
That's great. Good for you. I've met a lot of veterans that they got souvenirs from overseas, and then back in like the 1960s and 70s, there would be these sleazy guys that would come and say, "Hey, I'll pay you $20 for that," and they would sell it. And now, you know, they wish they could
No,
give it to their family.
It's in the family.
That's
yes.
great.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that story, sir. I still think, you know, it's incredible. You guys were 18, 19 years old, fighting for your life, and we have 18, 19-year-olds today who go to safe spaces if they don't like what they hear. And so it's, you know, you guys are storming beaches.
when you get into that kind of an environment, you grow up real fast. So that's what happens. My experience is that I can't swim, and I couldn't swim then. I can't swim now. So that's why I was paddling with my BAR. Can't swim.
I just interviewed a veteran up in Vermont. He had a drowning experience when he was a kid, and he was fighting in Italy. He had to cross, it's called the Rapido River, and they ended up putting a Bailey Bridge, but they were under fire. Or no, they weren't under fire at that time, but the river moved very fast, and so the bridge is moving. And he says that he saw guys ahead of him running across the Bailey Bridge, but he was so afraid of the water. He says, "I don't care what happens. I don't care if they shoot me from behind." He got on his hands and knees and crawled one by one. He thinks it took him like 25 minutes to go from here to there. And so, you know, I'm no good in the water either, so I can't fault you guys.
Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to ask you about was German snipers. My understanding is that oftentimes in the towns, the Germans would hide up in the church towers. Is that accurate?
Yes, I saw it just one time where we were in a home, a German home, and we were up in the second level, I guess. It was a two-family, and there was a sniper, a German sniper, but he wasn't in the church tower. He was in an attic of a home that had a window where you could open it and put his rifle through the window, and we took care of him. Yeah, but that's the only sniping I ever saw.
I've heard some, you know, sometimes these snipers, they were so arrogant, they would keep firing.
Yes, that fella here wouldn't quit until we got him. Yeah, yes, that was true. Yeah.
And
I remember what intrigued me too was he was bald-headed. So I don't know if he was a German. He wasn't, whether he was a soldier or not, but he was bald-headed. And he had a rifle, so he was the enemy.
Maybe that's why he was so angry at the world.
Bald guys.
Yeah. No, but that's natural. Back then, at that age. But
well, so that's an interesting aspect. Then, what about the knife you have, and the special the Spetsnaz? Yeah, the Spetsnaz, the special soldiers, but the young kids.
Oh, the younger.
Yes, and that they would shave
the Deutsche Junge. The Deutsche Junge. It was a group of young kids that were trained to sabotage our camps and our equipment, and I caught one guy, and I took I took a little sword away from him, and I took it home, and it's still in the family.
Sorry?
But
No, I just appreciate you sharing what you have. I mean, I understand, you know.
Hold that as you tell the story.
Paul.
Oh no, there's a. Oh okay.
That,
Yeah. Well, here you hold this.
I think what he wants you to do is
Hold it and tell
you
the
could
story.
say that story again, and then you can unsheath it and show the camera.
Because they were popping tires, right? They were popping tires.
yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, if you say that story, and then you can show the camera, this is what I.
Okay. Yeah, we had to when we camped, we kept a guard, kept on guard, and to protect what we had, because there were some people that really disliked us for coming over there and doing what we were doing. So one night we captured a few of these little guys, and we found out that they were part of what they called the Deutsche Junge, and these young teenagers, I guess, were just trained to sabotage what they could, and they were, for the most part, they were punching holes in the tires of our equipment, and this is what I took away from one guy, and I was able to get it home as a relic.
What was that like when you guys were faced? You know, not only did you face the German soldiers, but you faced kids with weapons, and they had the mindset that they were going to kill you. But you know,
It was a difficult thing to do. I don't ever remember that we killed any younger kids, because they usually ran. If we could catch them, we did. If we couldn't, we didn't, and that was it.
do you remember coming across any SS troops?
I believe that guy in the boathouse was an SS. Yeah, I think he was. Because he carried a pistol, he didn't have a rifle. That's my belief.
And I just wanted to ask you, sir, you mentioned that you became a squad leader. Was that after the war was over, or during combat you were a squad leader?
When I got over there through the Rebel Devils, I was a sergeant, buck sergeant, and when we came to a pause in the action, our records seemed to have caught up with us, and the captain of my outfit discovered that I was drawing sergeant's pay, and I had to admit that I was a sergeant. So that's when they put me in charge of they gave me a platoon, and soon after that I became a staff sergeant.
Can you talk about the responsibilities of being an NCO, especially, you know, in a combat zone?
In a combat zone, you worry about the people that are under you, that you determined to protect, and so it isn't just your own life you have to worry about. You got the responsibility of your men being healthy and not making too many mistakes. Yep.
Did you ever go to any of the reunions after the war for the 80th?
Not No, I didn't like to go to reunions or anything like that because I was convinced that the war was over, and it wasn't anything that I was really proud of. Just going over there and hating people and having to fight them, people that I didn't even know, you know. I wasn't too happy. I was not. I didn't consider myself a hero or anything like that. I just let it be. I had a chance to go back not too long ago, and I refused. I don't want to go back and think of the devastation that was over there.
Absolutely. I would ask you to change your way of thinking a little bit, that, you know, you weren't just sent over there to go hate people. I mean, you were sent there to stop some real evil that was taking over the world.
Well, I didn't go over there to do that, to hate people. I went over there to do what I was asked to do, but the most important thing to me at the time was to get back home again, because I had a pretty good life here. That was it.
Can you tell me, did you go steady with anyone when you were overseas?
Yes, I was going steady with my wife, with my girlfriend.
What's her name?
Connie, yeah, Connie Sato. I was in the service for 3 years, and she wrote to me every day that I was in the service. Of course, I didn't get the mail every day where I was, but I got every letter that she wrote in bunches. And as soon as I got home, we talked about marriage, and that was it, yeah.
How long were you guys married?
We were married for 70 years, yeah. 4 years ago, she passed away.
Wow. I know you didn't keep her letters, but did she keep the letters you would write back?
I really don't know where they are.
Yeah.
I really don't know. We have them?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And what were you going to say?
Well, yes, we saved, she did, save the letters that I wrote back to her. Yeah.
And the only other thing is, could you tell us about your experiences at Nuremberg? My understanding is that you were a witness to the trials?
Yes, when the war was over, when they declared a peace, we started to come home. I didn't quite have the enough points. I think we were on a point system. I didn't have the points to come home, so they transferred me to the First Division, the big one, I guess they called it. And for some reason, I ended up at the Nuremberg trials. And I don't remember if I was there as a soldier or as a visitor, but I remember sitting in the first balcony looking straight down at Goering, Hess, and Goebbels, and a few other guys that I don't remember. And that was quite an experience for me.
I mean, that's seeing evil up close.
Yes, we were up close.
Can you talk to us about your how you came back home and your reunion with your family when you first came back home?
How I reunited with my family?
Is that what you were saying?
What was the process like to come home from something like that? It's all done. You come home. Is there a parade for you?
No, there was no parade. No, when the war was over, when I was discharged, I remember coming home, leaving, and coming home on the MBTA. I got off a bus and I think I had a duffel bag, and I walked by the grammar school that I used to go to school, and just happened that one of the teachers was looking out the window,
So bright.
and she recognized me. And when I got home, she called me and asked me that if I would come back to the school before I took my uniform off and meet the children. And I did that. That was my experience. There was no celebration. There wasn't anything like that. I was just glad to get home. My mother was waiting for me.
That must have been such a nice reunion to see your mom again.
Yeah, it was. Being able to see my mother again, and of course my dad had died during my tenure as a soldier.
I mean, she must have been praying every day for all three of the boys.
What?
Your mom must have been praying every day for all three of the boys.
Yes. My older brother was still flying somewhere. Yes, yeah.
My only two things, sir, is what advice would you like to give to future generations?
Yeah.
I mean, if you could talk to your great grandkids, what is something you want them to know?
Well, I tell them to just, love your country. It's your first thing. Just make sure you love your country, you love your family, and be good to each other, and not try to start any controversies that may lead to a world war. That's it. Yeah, that's my advice. I have a grandson that followed me around, and so that he had to get into the Marines, and he did very well. He did excellent. He was in heavy equipment over in Afghanistan, and he come out as a captain. Very proud of him.
What kind of person do you want people to always think of you as?
As me? As I'd like to have people think of me as being a person that calls it the way it is, and is honest with people and himself, and just being a good citizen, and love his fellow man and his country. That's what I would like to be. That's what I am.